stands right here, stand by me. But darling, stand.
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Italian-born, Boston-based jazz saxophonist, composer, and educator Marco Pignataro. He teamed up with his Dream Alliance for the new 2022 CD Awakening that documents a virtual live concert at Boston's GBH Fraser Studio back in July of 2021, sponsored by Jazz Boston. The topic of this CD is the eternal subject of romantic love from a very different angle, and together these days with Danilo Perez, he currently leads the Berklee Global Jazz Institute, which is the world premier jazz center of musical creativity at the Berklee College of Music. Over the years, he has been quite successful performing with the best in jazz all over the world, along with educating the next crop of jazz musician. Enjoy his story.
Hey, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's my pleasure, Joe. Really, it really is.
So I really enjoyed the Dream Alliance Awakening. And before we get into talking about how you put this album together, you know, the world's starting to wake up. Live shows are happening. We're in a much different place right now in 2022 than we have been in the last couple of years. How does this release feel for you right now?
Well, almost like healing in many ways, because the last 2 years have been dramatic for the whole world, and I think we're still not quite sure about what kind of impact this period has had on all of us. And I feel this is like the first time that we experience something as a global community. And so, you know, to be able to produce music during these times and to see them going through and going out, to me personally, it's been a release, like a really healing, you know, personal journey, because all this music was creating during COVID, and the recording was recorded, you know, the concert was recorded during COVID. And so this album came out in April, and for me personally, so much related to how I was personally experiencing myself into the world and what was going on around us. So for me personally, it feels like something that I needed to kind of let out and sort of like reflect back on how we've been living in the last 2 years.
You know, I think the interesting thing about recordings that have been coming out is that we were starved so badly for live performance that this was a remote. This was a live session that you did actually capture. Did that add to the significance of this coming out now and being a live recording?
It's so interesting because it was a live recording in a studio. It was funny because it wasn't really a concert because nobody was in the studio, but we were broadcasting the concert live. It was a live stream. But around us, we were not in a theater. We were actually in this beautiful Fraser studio in Boston. And so it has this hybrid feeling of performing live for an audience that you don't see, but being in an environment where you recognize everything as being a recording studio with one of, you know, Grammy Award-winning, sound engineer. And so it was strange, you know, and a lot of how this project came about was because of that setting, because I was seeing a lot of live stream concerts at that time because that's all you could do, like you were saying, right? And it to me always seemed really strange that people would play in front of anybody and then would act like somebody was there and they were talking. And it always felt like a little strange and weird, and not, you know, the part where they would stop and address an audience that is not there. I didn't see myself doing that at all. So when Jazz Boston asked me to put this concert together and doing this live stream, I thought, you know, I don't want to do that. I want to actually create an illusion where instead of a concert, this is a play. And if you see the original video, which is really doesn't reflect in the CD the way it is now. It is actually almost like a musical play where I use all my poems and monologue and basically create a storyline where we start the music and the music never ends, and the poems and the monologue sort of create this interesting transition from music to music, from song to song. A lot of music improvised, especially in the transition from a tune into another. And it was an experience like I never had because we were totally live. We had maybe one rehearsal and we were all like kind of getting to a journey that we never did. And we had not the possibility like you have in the studio where if you mess something up, you say, well, let's do this again. We didn't have that because we actually were recording live. There was a video and everybody was watching in the moment. So it was really such a product of that particular moment where I didn't feel myself going and doing a normal concert for an audience that is not there, and kind of coming up with this idea of like integrating my poems, which I never did before. And it's funny because the organizer, one of the director of the organization, when she asked me to play this concert, and I said, sure. And, she saw a previous concert that I did in the studio, always also during COVID, with strings and a jazz quartet, and it was all old Napolitan love songs, and she loved it because it was something like she never heard it. So she'd say, well, I would like for you to do another thing. And then she said, I went to your website and I noticed that in the last tab, because I put it there, you have all these beautiful poems. Have you ever thought about doing music with these poems? And to me, it was like such a dumb moment because I actually never thought of it, right? And so as she said that, I said, well, I can't believe I never thought about this. And so I came up with this storyline and creating all this music, which basically become, the music become a soundtrack for us, story told by poems and monologues. And so that's how the music came about, that project came about. And then, are you still there? When the concert came out, everybody really loved it because it was kind of a different concept. Then when the label wanted to produce the concert, of course, to make that particular project into an album, you had to sort of change. And so the album, in a way, it is not reflecting the play that we created. It's basically a testimony of all the music and most of the poems that I use. And so I actually had to rewrite in my mind how I put together the story for the album. In the play, in the live concert, the story was going from dark to bright. And if you pay attention, the album is actually the opposite. It starts very bright and kind of almost peachy rosy, and then it starts getting darker and darker, then finish into a pensive, hopeful mood for the future. And of course, it's a storyline of love because that's one of my favorite themes to talk about. And so it was interesting, as you said, that all of this happened as a fruit of what we were experiencing in that moment. And maybe without COVID, this would never happen because I would never have maybe come up with an idea to create a musical play with my poems and music.
Over this time of quarantine and kind of slowing down, what did you learn about yourself that maybe you didn't realize before this pandemic started that's going to make you stronger as you promote this album and play live music more?
I love that you asked me this question because I asked this question to a lot of people because I do feel that COVID was a moment of self-reflection, and I certainly saw it that way. And I realized in those 2 years, I don't know if you know, but I direct a program at Berklee College of Music called the Berklee Global Jazz Institute. So during those 2 years, I was in my role as a mentor to a lot of wonderful, talented students, and they were struggling so badly because, we were all struggling, but when you're 20 years old, you have much less point of references how to go through like the situation like this. And I felt like even my older generation, I would call my mentors, and they really don't know what was going on because I never experienced that. But anyway, so that's something that I kept on thinking about is in this moment of extreme confusion and uncertainty, which I think was the worst of all of the things that were happening, was this idea that you were so uncertain. We still are, but I never felt so certain about the future, was to realize that everything I did in my past, in a way, this period would put into a focus, and sort of like when you see something out of like a lens, that everything get bigger. And I realized that how grateful I was for the opportunity and the life and the choices I made in terms of everything I did prior, because in that moment, I would not have had those things that I had built in my life, my experience with COVID would have been really, really different. And I saw a lot of people really struggling with really dramatic life issues. And I felt comparison, everything that I was experiencing was so much easier, to a lot of people I personally know, without even getting to the health issue that a lot of people got sick and died. But, people that were surviving that moment. I felt that, looking at how I was experiencing, I was glad that all of the things I built, in a way, in that moment supported me, and they were able to make me leave this very difficult moment with gratitude and have the strength to help my younger students that, were really a lot of them living in a little room, and or went back home where, the moment of their life, they're supposed to go out and discover the world, and the world say, no, you're going to go back to, your little room with your mom and dad, or maybe they're stuck, in a dorm, or stuck in an apartment with 6 roommates, and so I had to serve as almost like as a therapist, to these students that, now I would see every day on Zoom for all day. So I learned about myself that, loving gratitude and a certain spiritual upbringing and direction that I have, I really realized how important that was for me and how much that supported me and made me able to create a lot of music. Because incredibly enough, in those 2 years, I recorded 3 major projects. And I never been so active, like in a moment when basically nobody was doing a lot of things. I feel I created the 3 most important projects of my life. One, the one that we are talking about. Another one is going to come up in September. It's called Chant for Our Planet, and with an incredible cast of musicians, Joe Lovano, Terry Lynn Carrington, John Patitucci. It's just an amazing project that I was commissioned by the Talbert Foundation in awareness for, the problem we have, climate change, and they wanted to create this project to show to the Glasgow Accord in October. And so I did that at that recording and this project with strings that was commissioned by the Italian consulate. And so all of this is, to me, when I think back, it's incredible because this all happened during COVID and because COVID, in a way. And so I really kind of self-reflect about this idea of resilience, but the resilience has to be built on things that you kind of work on all your life. And so in a way it was a confirmation that a lot of the things that was leading my life were the things that I really needed in my life. And so from my family to my colleagues to my work to my music, all of that kind of sheltered me and supported me in basically one of the hardest time we ever experienced in present life.
So you're originally from Italy. Talk to me a little bit about how jazz became a focal point and your passion and led to where you are today.
In Italy, when I left Italy, I was 25 years old, and back then, jazz was not part of my community. But I fell in love with jazz in when I was a teenager by listening to records, especially. I remember my father had this Stan Getz album that, in the 60s, Stan Getz did this record with the Brazilian musicians and it became a classic. So a lot of people that were not listening to jazz would listen to this record. My father was not into jazz, but he had this record. And so when I listened to Stan Getz the first time, the sound, that melodic approach, that lyrical approach he had, that way of like playing so beautifully across, the harmonies and create this beautiful line. I don't know. To me, that was my point of entry to a world that I had no idea what it was, because, in Italy, we really, jazz was something that, few people would follow, although, a lot of jazz musicians would come in summer to play. But I wasn't into the music until I I listened to this record. And that was my doorway to a journey that I'm still sort of like going through. And so when you fall in love with jazz, it's just like falling in love with anything that is almost like you get, a germ inside of you, and you can't just, live your life the way it was. So I had to reshape everything as I knew it as a teenager. I was studying, before I was into rock, and I was playing new wave and then when I discovered this music, I understood that to me it was important to look at music from a very much serious point of view, and understood if I wanted to, be part of this world, I had to become a better musician. I actually had to study music, and I actually to really kind of dedicate myself. So jazz kind of make me do this transition from using music as a way of expressing my youth's energy, right, and having fun, to actually considering as a life journey and start really getting to a mindset of studying and learning. And I had to learn everything. It was like starting from the beginning. And so that led me to, because back then, unlike now, there were not a lot of resources for learning. That led me to, wanted to leave Italy and come to the United States. I came here in 91 and went to, I applied to University of Miami. I got a scholarship to live there, and then I never came back from Miami. I basically, from 1991, I stayed in the United States and embraced the life of the jazz musician full time.
So what was the first live jazz show that you saw that really blew you away, that made you think, man, this is it?
Well, when I was in Italy and I started checking out the American jazz musician that came to my hometown, which is Bologna, there were two concerts that were really basically that created that impact on me. One was seeing the Art Blakey Jazz Messengers. That was incredible. It's just I never saw a group coming with inside a theater. I still remember Art came they were all dressed up, right? And he has this beautiful jacket, and he sit in the drum, in the drum throne, and before playing but I know he takes off the jacket and then start like riding this group like he'd be riding a horse, and he was like, wow, it's like I never saw anything like that. They were all playing no music, but they were all connecting, and it was like this engine, pushing, them, and kind of, it was almost like he was kicking their butt from the drum throne, and pushing the energy. And so that was really insane. I never saw anything like that. And witnessing the Art Blakey, Messengers was something, Jazz Messengers was really something incredible. And then I got to see Stan Getz live, and that really changed my life, because I could see from the record. Now I'm hearing, I remember I was sitting in the first row, and I see this man. He comes in the theater, and he blows two notes in the microphone, and he doesn't like many times that's happening, the sound. So he puts the microphone away and start playing without the microphone, and this sound is traveling throughout the theater. Like, he did not need the microphone at all. And just to witness, to perceive that sound, the beauty of it. I remember, like, after 5 minutes, I would start, like, tearing up, because it was one of the most beautiful thing I ever experienced, like having this kind of, body reaction to music, like this sound coming inside me and making my skin shivers. So I never forget that. So, and this was really early on. This was some of the first show I saw.
So what is it like to work with someone like Danilo Perez with the Global Jazz Institute? What does that work like?
Oh, what an interesting question. It's like thrown into a creative hurricane. That's what it feels like, because it's nothing is linear, and all of the best ideas come from a working environment where everything is chaotic around you. Everything is sort of like extemporaneous in a way, where the energy feeds, this incredible environment we created. So, and this is a little bit of my job, is to create a little bit of sense into the hurricane energy, right? Because he's really a visionary, and his experience with Wayne Shorten, you can tell how much he has grown as an artist from that. And so a lot of the ideas and vision come from that aesthetic and come from this idea of that. It's like, the famous, he always remind all the students about the famous quote of Wayne saying, well, how can you rehearse the unknown, right? So this idea of like embracing what we call the zero gravity, embracing this idea that when we don't overplan for anything and we are in the moment, this is where you test yourself and you really sort of learn who you are. Musically, certainly, this is what the message, a lot of what we create is. It's like creating this environment of really extreme attention to creativity and spontaneity and thinking outside of the box in many, many ways. And I feel that by working with him and by working in our program for 30 years now, this has created a lot of this sort of idea of why I do the project I do, which are not your regular jazz quartet, or it's just like this mentality of really, don't box creativity into a style, don't box jazz into something that fits a mold, because you go against the spirit of what this music is. And so all of this is a little bit of what I experienced living in Boston and working in this specific environment with Danilo as the artistic director, and, Joe Lovano and John and Terry Lynn. They're all artists that are all not your usual jazz revivalist at all. And so you feel this, you understand that there's a spirit in this music that comes from who you are as a person, and that you need to bring it out. It's not as much as recreating how the music was played, as much as how can you enter a creative process where you put everything you are into the music. And so this is a lot of the new vision, and it's it's like an hurricane. Since I met him, that's the way I feel. When every time we're together, it's just like if we have a meeting about, okay, we have to do a meeting to talk about the curriculum. It's never a meeting. It's just like it's a whole day of experiencing, all sort of a conversation, ideas, and it's very, as I said, non-linear.
So what is it that you like the best about being a professional musician and doing what you do in the world of music? What do you look forward to the most every day?
Well, first of all, I don't see myself as a professional musician, in the sense that I don't see as music as a profession. And I don't say that I have a career in music. I say I have a life in music. And so from that point of view, my whole outlook about how to answer your question is that life is not my work. I mean, music is not my work as much as my life, and it's part of my life, and I need it to function, and I need it to function emotionally, especially because I as a composer and as a performer, I use music as a way of expressing a lot of my personal feelings and emotion that words cannot. And so to me, I grew up with this idea of using music as a way of communicating. So you see, when somebody says, "Oh, you're a professional musician," at all effect I am. I don't equate music to a profession, and I don't see myself as building a career. I actually hate that vision and I hate that world, because I'm not a politician. I'm not. I don't have a career. I'm a musician that I need to be around in music to function. And so that's how I see it. To me, music is just a part of my world, and that's, coming back to what I was saying, the fact that I was able to be, sustain myself by being a musician. It is one of the biggest blessing and the biggest gratitude that I feel, because I would not know how to do another kind of life.
So everyone has a perception or an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, your students, but ultimately you live your life. Who do you think you are?
Wow. I think I am perhaps a too sensitive person, and I think I am somebody that was born with a very strong ability to feel, to have sort of an intrapersonal intelligence and an interpersonal intelligence, meaning it's very easy for me to see inside myself and to connect with other people. What I think I am, which is something that I'm still kind of trying to learn in my journey as a musician, as a teacher, is somebody that has some sort of mission in this art, in this world, to help people and to help the community. And I feel when I look back on my life, I can see how much of the world has shown me and put me in a situation where I was feeling the best of who I was and who I am every time I would be in service to other people. And to me, music is also that, because the way we approach music as educators in our program is looking at music as a way of human development. So looking at using music to help young people to become the best person they can be, and create a different model of what musicians are. Or there is people suppose they look at us like we're entertainer, and we don't teach that at all. We actually teach that in music you can use that to really affect your community. The question it's very difficult to answer in a sentence, but if I have to go back to what I think my ultimate, not desire as much as mandate, is really that I am supposed for everything I've been given and everything that I have and everything that I feel and how I feel and how I perceive others. I'm here to be some sort of person that is supposed to help, especially young people. I never thought it quite that way, but if I have to answer, maybe that's what comes to my mind at this moment.
Right on. Marco, hey man, thank you for taking a minute out for the show. Good luck with the new album and the return to the stage. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was really, really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Italy, Boston, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Marco for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. And for everything Joe Domino, go to joedomino.com. And if you feel like it, you can donate to the Neon Jazz cause there. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.